He just wanted to have a drink at the bar. But instead he caught a robber. An old lady? Gratitude? No. Only new problems. And now this night is a real test for him. Dear viewer, subscribe and like so that I know that you liked my story. Lynchfield at night was as gloomy as its inhabitants. The narrow streets, squeezed between old brick houses, breathed dampness, smelled of cheap beer and gasoline. The wind drove trash along the asphalt, poorly screwed road signs creaked, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked. Jason Statham walked along the sidewalk towards the Rusty Bullet bar, his hands in the pockets of his leather jacket. It had been a boring day, and he hoped that the night would bring at least some entertainment, a couple of glasses of whiskey and silence. But a good night did not happen. In front, right under the street lamp, stood an elderly woman. Small, hunched over, in an old beige coat. She was rummaging through her bag, when suddenly a guy in a gray hoodie jumped up to her, grabbed her wallet and rushed away. Jason stopped, squinted, but didn't move. It was a typical city scene, a dirty street, a petty thief and a helpless old lady. "Hey! What are you standing there like a statue for?" a sharp voice suddenly rang out. He slowly turned his gaze to the old lady. She looked at him as if he were not a random bystander, but her personal bodyguard. "You're a healthy man. What are you looking at?" she continued, stamping her foot. "Catch him before he runs away." Jason raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Are you serious?" "Of course," the old lady exclaimed, waving her arms indignantly. He sighed, turned around and ran. The guy in the gray hoodie raced through the streets, jumping over trash cans and benches. He was fast, but Jason was faster. The chase didn't last long. Statham caught up with him in an alley, grabbed him by the hood and slammed him into a brick wall. "Ow, shit. Dude, what are you doing?" the thief screamed, trying to break free. "You picked the wrong person to run from," Jason answered coldly, twisting his arm and taking his wallet. The robber whined in pain. Statham turned around and slowly walked back to the old woman. When he handed her the wallet, expecting at least a drop of gratitude, the woman only angrily grabbed it and shook her head in displeasure. "What took you so long?" she grumbled. He could have escaped a long time ago if he hadn't been so clumsy. "Really?" Jason grinned, shaking his head in disbelief. "Yes. You should have reacted earlier, and not stood there like a pillar." She snorted and, without saying another word, hid the wallet in her pocket and walked away. Statham looked after her and only grinned. What an evening. It was time to go to the bar. Jason Statham walked along the wet asphalt, leaving behind the alley where his short but very funny encounter with the old lady and the thief had just unfolded. The Rusty Bullet bar was already in sight, its neon sign flickering like the tired heart of this town. But before he could cross the road, he felt a familiar prick in the back of his head. Someone was watching. He stopped at the entrance to the bar, taking out a cigarette. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed, a gray sedan, parked across the street, started the engine, but did not move from the spot. Two people were inside. Smoking, looking in his direction. "Interesting," he muttered, pretending not to notice the surveillance. Entering, he took a seat in the far corner, ordered whiskey, and began to think. It all started with a stupid theft of a wallet. Could it be just a coincidence? The mugger looked like a common street thief, but the old lady. She was too pushy. Too sure that he would intervene. He shook the glass of amber liquid thoughtfully. The door of the bar opened, and 3 people walked in. Leather jackets, cold looks. They moved confidently, as if they knew why they came. One of them sat down opposite him. "You're Jason, right?" He took a sip of whiskey and answered calmly. "Depends on who's asking." The man leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You've gotten involved in something that's not your business today." Statham chuckled. I just gave the old lady her purse back. Is that a crime? If it had just been an old lady. Now it's getting more interesting. Explain, he said, putting the glass down. She was using you, buddy, the stranger continued. Testing you. Wanted to see how good you were. And it looks like you impressed her. Jason exhaled slowly. Go on. She works for a guy who needs guys like you. But since you're going to be a hero, we have another problem. The man nodded to his men. They were already getting up from their chairs, their hands reaching for their belts. Statham shook his head. You guys picked the wrong bar. Before they realized what was happening, he had knocked over a table, kicked one into the counter, and elbowed the second in the face. The third managed to grab a weapon, but Jason knocked the gun away and knocked him unconscious with a powerful blow. The bartender wasn't even surprised, continuing to wipe his glass. Jason leaned over to one of the fallen opponents and asked hoarsely. Where is she? He groaned, coughing up blood. Hotel Eldrich, 4th floor. Statham stood up, straightened his jacket and headed for the exit. It was time to find out who this old woman really was. Jason Statham walked out of the Rusty Bullet into a night that already smelled like gunpowder. The wind blew the neon sign, one letter of which was no longer lit, and the city went about its business as usual, cab drivers lazily smoking in their cars, music playing softly somewhere, and across the street a drunk man trying to prove to the soda machine that he had thrown $1 into it. But Jason had other things on his mind right now. He glanced up at the sedan, still parked across the street. Now he knew that it was not just the 3 idiots from the bar who were watching him. The car had stalled, but its silhouette was still motionless. Someone inside was watching him. He pretended not to notice and walked quickly toward his car, an old Challenger parked just down the street. He started the engine, turned on the headlights and, without looking, pulled out onto the road, abandoning the car in the direction of the Eldrich Hotel. The Eldrich Hotel, traces of the past. This place had once been expensive, with luxurious rooms, marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Now it was a miserable semblance of its former self, peeling plaster, burnt-out light bulbs, dirty carpet. It was a place for those who had nowhere else to go. Jason parked on the corner, leaving the car in the shadows. He wondered why the old woman wanted to check on him so much. She obviously knew he would interfere. But what if it was a trap? He entered the hotel through the main entrance. A fat man of about 50 was sitting at the reception, lazily leafing through a newspaper. Without looking up, he lazily said. Room 4th floor, Statham answered, passing by. Take the stairs, the elevator is broken, the receptionist muttered, not even looking in his direction. The 4th floor greeted him with silence. Deaf, viscous, suspicious. Old doors with peeling paint stretched along the corridor. He checked the holster under his jacket. The weapon was in place. The room he was looking for was at the end of the corridor. He stepped towards it, but at that moment he felt movement behind him. His reflexes kicked in before he had time to realize the threat. He turned sharply, parrying the blow flying at him. The opponent, a man in dark clothes, stepped forward sharply, trying to deliver a series of quick attacks. But Jason was faster. A deft sidestep, a grab, a powerful elbow strike to the solar plexus. The opponent bent over, and Statham instantly finished him off with a knee to the face. He fell to the floor unconscious. Well, then, I'm at the right place. He muttered, opening the door. Meeting with Grandma. The room was dimly lit by one lamp. The same old lady was sitting in a chair, holding a cup of tea. She didn't even look surprised. You've taken a long time, she said dryly. If I'd known you were waiting for me like that, I'd have tried to be quicker, he replied, closing the door behind him. I knew you'd follow me, she said, putting the cup down. You're not the kind of person who just forgets when they're drawn into games. I'd say I don't like being manipulated. The old lady nodded, her eyes sparkling with cunning. Okay. Then let's not call it manipulation, but a test. Statham crossed his arms over his chest. And what did you find out? That you're suitable. Suitable for what? For what's coming. She stood up, walked with unexpected ease to the cabinet, and opened it. Inside were dozens of files, scattered papers, several photographs. She took one out and threw it on the table. Jason came closer and looked. There was a man in the picture, stern, with a predatory face, gray temples and a piercing gaze. Kevin Marlowe, the old woman said. Should know him. He doesn't want you to know. And what should I do with him? The old woman smiled. Kill him. Jason grinned. You're a good judge of character, to think I'd say yes right away. She shrugged. You're already committed. It's not a choice, it's an inevitability. He looked at the photograph. Something told him this night in Lynchfield would be a long one. Jason Statham sat in a dimly lit room, holding a photograph of Kevin Marlowe. The man in the picture looked straight into his soul with his cold, tenacious eyes. Statham knew people like that, tough, calculating, those who were used to always being one step ahead. If you want me to kill him, then he already knows about me, Jason said, not taking his eyes off the photo. The old woman chuckled and returned to the chair, picking up her cup of tea again. You're smart. That's why I chose you. You have a whole network of mercenaries. Why me? She took a sip and answered calmly. Because Marlowe is afraid of unpredictable people. He knows who's hunting him. He knows how the professionals work. And you. She smiled, you came to me yourself. Statham narrowed his eyes. It wasn't a choice. Every step you take is a choice. Even now. He glanced at the photo again. Where is he? Still in town, but not for long. He has a meeting at the Inferno nightclub. If you hurry, you can catch him there. I hope you have something useful besides a photo. She nodded toward the closet. Blueprints of the club, security locations, cameras, an evacuation plan. Jason stood up, walked over, and quickly looked through the papers. This place belonged to the cartel a while back, the old woman explained. After their fall, Marlowe took control of the club and turned it into a gathering point for those who solve dirty issues. He has serious security, entry by invitation. I don't have one. But you have fists, she grinned. You can handle it. Jason closed the cabinet and put the photos in his pocket. I don't like surprises. I hope you haven't hidden anything important. Just one thing, she said when he was already at the door. Marlowe already knows you've contacted him. Statham chuckled. That makes it all the more interesting. He left, closing the door behind him, and headed for his car. Club Inferno. The city was immersed in nightlife, the streets were filled with lights, car lights, and loud music from the windows. Inferno was located in the business district, but its essence was far from legitimate business. The club was surrounded by tinted cars and people in dark suits. Security at the entrance carefully checked each guest to exclude random visitors. Jason parked in an alley and looked around. It would be stupid to force his way in directly. He waited until another car drove up to the club. A well-dressed man stepped out, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive suit. Statham walked quickly up to him, like a drunk passerby, and asked with a lazy smile. Hey, buddy, got a light? The man snorted, not deigning to look at him. Get out of here. Jason didn't give him time to think, a lightning-fast punch to the stomach, then to the neck. The man fell unconscious. Statham grabbed him by the arm and dragged him to a dark corner of the alley, where he quickly took off his jacket and ID. A minute later, he was already walking towards the entrance, casually shoving his hands in his pockets. The guard at the door glanced at him, then at the ID, nodded and stepped aside. "Come in." Statham went inside. Inside the inferno. The club was chaotic, lights, loud music, tables laden with expensive alcohol. The patrons were men in expensive suits and women in revealing outfits. There was a sense of power and money here. Jason didn't want to attract attention and moved deeper into the VIP area. On the second floor, behind darkened glass walls, there were closed offices. That's where Marlowe should be. One of the guards at the stairs stuck out his hand. "The pass here doesn't give access upstairs." Statham grinned. "Then I'll have to improvise." Before the guard realized what was happening, Jason grabbed his arm, jerked him forward, breaking his elbow, and threw him face first into the wall. The second guard reached for his gun, but Statham had already punched him in the jaw, then took the gun away and pressed it to his forehead. "Where's Marlowe?" The guard spat out blood. "He's waiting for you." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Well, it's nice when guests are expected." He knocked the guard out and moved upstairs. Face to face with Kevin Marlowe. The VIP area was decorated in dark tones, with soft leather chairs and heavy curtains. In the center of the room, at a massive table, sat the very man from the photo. Kevin Marlowe looked at him with a slight grin, holding a glass of whiskey. "You made me wait." Statham stepped closer, but took his time. "I don't like to rush when it comes to strangers." Marlowe put his glass down and leaned forward. "So that's who you are, an accidental hero, who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or was it planned?" Jason sat down opposite him, crossing his legs. "You should know the answer." "Oh, I know. I was just wondering when you'd figure it out." Marlowe pulled a photograph out of his pocket. Jason recognized himself. The picture had been taken not long ago. "You're not the first one the old witch has sent. But you seem to be the most resilient." "And you're not the first one I'll kill," Statham replied calmly. Marlowe laughed. "You're too confident." He clapped his hands. The door behind Jason opened, and 3 armed men entered the room. Marlowe looked at him with a slight sneer. "You know what separates a good hunter from a bad one?" Statham was silent. Marlowe raised his glass. "A good hunter knows that his prey can also be a hunter." He took a sip, and the men behind Jason raised their weapons. But Statham was already moving. A lightning-fast swing of the chair backwards, a shot from the pistol at the nearest enemy, a leap to the side, avoiding the fire. The Inferno Club was turning into a battlefield. And that night in Lynchfield was indeed a long one. The Inferno Club had become a battlefield. Flashes of gunfire illuminated the darkened walls, bullets knocked out pieces of furniture, and the music still thundered, as if oblivious to the chaos. Jason Statham rolled behind a massive leather couch, dodging a burst of machine gun fire. One of the guards came closer, aiming at him, but Jason grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the table and threw it at his opponent's face. The glass shattered, and the man screamed, clutching his eyes. The next moment, Statham knocked the gun out of his hands, turned him around, and sent him head-on into the marble floor. 2 left. Kevin Marlowe was still sitting at the table, calmly watching the action, like a director confident in his ending. "Come on, make me happy," he muttered, sipping his whiskey. One of the guards tried to get behind him, but Jason, as if sensing this, spun around, grabbed his wrist and twisted it so hard that the bone came out of the joint with a crack. The man screamed, but Statham had already moved him forward, using him as a human shield from the second guard's burst. 3 shots rang out, and the body in Jason's arms went limp. The last opponent blinked, realizing that he had just killed his partner. "Shit." He breathed out, but did not have time to finish. Statham stepped forward, intercepted his hand, hit the guy in the temple with his elbow, and then knocked the gun out and nailed the guy with a knee to the stomach. He wheezed and sank to the floor. Now only he and Marlowe were left in the room. Beautiful, Marlowe said calmly, putting the glass on the table. Even a little impressive. He did not look scared. More like disappointed. Come on, finish it, he said, spreading his arms. Are you so sure I'm going to kill you? Statham asked, putting the gun in his belt. Marlowe chuckled. You're not here to talk. Jason looked at him sharply. I don't like being manipulated. Then why are you here? Statham bowed his head. Good question. Marlowe looked at him sharply, then chuckled. You got it, huh? Too late, Jason said, taking out his phone and showing a photo. There was the old lady on the screen. But it wasn't just a photo, it was a still from a security camera, where she was talking to a man. Is that your man? Statham asked. Marlowe looked at the screen and shook his head. No. But I know who it is. Jason stared at him. Who? Marlowe picked up the phone, zoomed in on the photo, and chuckled. Willie the Jackal. An old agent who used to work for the government. Now a double agent who sells information to anyone with money. Why was he meeting her? I think they had a common interest. Statham narrowed his eyes. I was part of this game. Marlowe chuckled. What do you think? Jason considered. He had come here to kill Marlowe. But now the picture looked different. So it was a trap, he said. The old lady used you as a pawn, Marlowe confirmed. Statham pulled out his gun, but he didn't point it at Marlowe. Where is she now? Marlowe shook his head. If I knew, I would have done what you're going to do to her already. Jason put the gun away and headed for the exit. If you find her first, tell her I said hi, Marlowe called after him. I will, Jason replied and walked out. The night was fading, but for Jason, the night had been too long. He left the club, got into his car and started the engine. He had one debt left, the old lady. There was one address in his phone, the one where she was staying. He arrived there 15 minutes later. The Eldrich Hotel was the same, shabby, old, with dirty windows. Jason went upstairs. The door to the room was ajar. He pulled out his gun and went in. The old lady was sitting in a chair. But she didn't look so confident now. You're quick, she said calmly, taking a sip of tea. Who's Willie the Jackal? He asked, not moving away from the door. She sighed. The one who used us both. You gave me a decoy. No, Kevin Marlowe is dangerous. But he's not the main player. You wanted us to kill each other. She shrugged. I'd rather be that way. Jason stepped forward slowly. You have one last chance to explain yourself. She looked at him, then put her cup down. I've already said everything. He looked at her silently. You're not going to kill an old lady, are you? She chuckled. Statham sighed, put the gun away, and stepped closer. She relaxed, but only for a moment. He grabbed her by the throat and lifted her up. She wheezed, trying to break free. You wanted me to be a pawn, he hissed. Now I'm the end of you. He yanked her to the floor. Her body fell, no longer moving. He knew he'd killed her. He turned and walked out without looking back. Game over, he muttered, walking into the night. Somewhere in the distance, the rusty bullet neon came on again. Jason got into his car and started the engine. Lynchfield didn't seem like such a small town anymore. This game was over. But there would be a new one. He knew it. He drove, leaving the city behind. And the night finally became quiet.